Well, I suppose we might do a soft opening. I don't know. It doesn't look like everybody's here yet. Um, and we did have several people who signed on to see if it worked. Um, I'm Terry Lohman. I'm co-chair for UU's for a just economic community. Um, this is our annual meeting. Tell you what we've done since July of 2023. First, I'd like to thank Sally Gellert for her organizing the annual report and the annual meeting. It's no small feat. I'd also like to thank Carl McCargo for lining up Professor Sut Jhally. Carl can't be here today because he's in Kenya. And the rest of the board has been contributing time and treasure to ensure that we're a vital part of the UU universe. I don't know if Bob's here, but Bob Murphy gets a special shout out after retiring from the board. He's one of our prime agitators. He writes proposals for actions of immediate witness and then follows them up with outreach and updates. Thanks, Bob. I want to introduce Sut Jhally, who's our keynote speaker. He's got an interesting and very vital subject, and I'm anxious to hear what he has to say.
Okay, I'm taking it away. Okay.
Go ahead.
How many people were able to, did you send out the link for Occupation of the American Mind?
I sent out the link for the registration to 1,420 people.
But you didn't send out a link for the film. You said there was a...
Oh, I didn't send a link to the film. I'm sorry.
Okay, so let
I
me...
was supposed to. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So I did a film, or we did a film. I mean, I'm executive. I'm a professor at UMass. Actually, just retired from after 35 years. I'm also executive director of the Media Education Foundation, and we make films around the impact of the media and culture on society. And the film we made in 2016 was called The Occupation of the American Mind, Israel's PR war in the US. And he looked at the way that the Israel lobby has really set the boundaries for how we can talk about, I don't want to call it a conflict. I don't think Israel-Palestine is a conflict. It's two equal sides, but it's not. It is a vastly one-sided one-sided affair. But we looked to see how Americans especially understood, or how the media presented, the Israel-Palestine conflict. And as I understand, the title of the film was The Occupation of the American Mind, and looked at how closely the lobby was able to limit the ways in which the situation was presented, to show Israel as kind of always on the defensive, being attacked by these hordes of Arabs. So that's the background. And the film is available for free online. If you go to occupationmovie.org, you can see the film. You can see that you can access the film there. So I'm not going to repeat what's in the film. What I think is interesting is I want to talk about the situation post October the 7th, because I think something new and very significant has emerged since then. In fact, when news of the Hamas attack on October the 7th first emerged, it was like the film that we made in 2016. It was like could have been made that day. As I've talked about before, then this was really propaganda on steroids. Everything that we had talked about in terms of how the story was told was heightened even. So it didn't. The first few days didn't surprise me at all. It was exactly how we would have predicted it from the film that we did. But after about 3 days, in fact, around October the 10th, something new started to emerge, something that I hadn't seen before. And this was the claim that Hamas had not only launched a military attack on Israel, but in doing so had committed horrendous atrocities against civilians, and beyond just a military attack. And it went beyond just what actually the attack was about, which was trying to get as many hostages back to Gaza as possible as political leverage for Hamas in their negotiations with Israel. And the new claims now was that Hamas had, as I said, committed these horrendous atrocities. And initially, and you, I'm sure, have heard of them, initially the claim was that Hamas was beheading babies, that as they had attacked the kibbutzes, they had attacked civilians, and that they were monsters who had attacked babies. Not only attacked babies, but beheaded babies. And pretty soon, the headline was 40 beheaded babies. So what I was interested in doing, and I'll give you I'm actually working on a film right now with Max Blumenthal. Max Blumenthal is one of the editors of The Gray Zone, and has been one of the major people looking at how Israel has been able to control this story. So I'm working on a film with Max because he's been dealing with this for a while. And so one of the things I was interested in as a scholar of propaganda and public relations, I mean, my own broad academic interest is in terms of how advertising functions as a form of persuasion. So as I was interested in that, I was like, how did this come about? Where did this claim of the 40, actually, if you could just put your hands up, how many of you have heard the claim of the 40 beheaded babies? Yeah, almost everyone, right? It's one of the most powerful forms of propaganda that's been propagated in this in this situation. Now, where did it come about? So I'm going to share my screen now, because I just want to. I just want to do it as a kind of case study to show you how this works and what was new in this and why then it was needed to be new. So I'm going to share my screen. So this was the initial report came from a reporter who worked for an Israeli TV program or Israeli TV channel called I-24. The I-24 as a TV channel is underwritten by the Israeli Foreign Office. So it is a propaganda arm of the Israeli government. But this was the first time that this was mentioned. This is, her name is Nicole Zedek, who is reporting from one of the kibbutzes, Kfar Aza kibbutz.
One of the commanders here said at least 40 babies were killed. Some of them their heads cut off. He said he's never seen acts of brutality like this. And as I said, many of these soldiers were called from reserve duties coming down here.
Okay, so that was the first time the reporter says soldiers had told her that there were babies and beheaded babies that were found in these kibbutzes. In another clip, she then talks about how she saw these gurneys, these gurneys coming out with 40 babies on them. Okay, and then the soldier that's quoted from this is he's a commander in the IDF, Unit 71. His name is David Ben Zion. And he says,
We walk door after door. We kill a lot of the terrorists. We are stronger than them. They are aggressive. They are very bad. They cut head of children, cut head of women, but we are stronger than them.
Okay, so that is the start of this. When you trace it back, that is where this started. It was Nicole Zedek, and then essentially this person saying that there were beheaded babies. Now, very soon, without any independent verification, the print media especially picks this up. There are reporters from around the world who have been shepherded around these areas by the Israeli public relations team, and these reporters picking up, and there are lurid headlines in the US, in the UK especially, about 40 beheaded babies. And then very soon after, actually the first thing to know about this guy is, I mean, it's always important to know what the sources are. He's not just a soldier. He's not just a reservist. He actually is an extremist Zionist settler who has called for Palestinian villages to be razed to the ground. So this is not some innocent Palestinian or innocent soldier. He's highly motivated. You know, from a very problematic witness to start off with. Pretty soon, though, as I said, the headlines kept the headlines in UK media especially, but in American media as well. I think the New York Daily Post picked this up as well, and then the Prime Minister Netanyahu's office then confirms it. Sorry, it is playing just for a second.
Lastly, when you listed the unconscionable atrocities that took place in that kibbutz, you did say that babies had been decapitated. Can I take that as confirmation then? Because that currently is being reported as reported action. That has actually happened, has it?
Toddlers, babies. I can tell you that they, some of them, yeah, heads were cut off. This is what we're hearing from from soldiers on the ground and that dealt with the bodies. These bodies are still being, some of them evacuated. I can tell you that people who were on this foreign media tour to the that kibbutz, some of them vomited. International journalists, some of them, many of them cried. In fact, these were images very hard to process of tiny bags, tiny body bags, you know, of toddlers and children. And yes, they cut off heads. They cut off heads.
Okay, so that seems to be confirmation, or not, it is confirmation by the by Netanyahu's office that in fact there were beheaded babies. The next day, or almost immediately, CNN picks this up.
We mean that. Stay close. Sarah?
We have some really disturbing new information out of Israel. The Israeli Prime Minister's spokesman just confirmed babies and toddlers were found with their heads decapitated in Kfar Aza in southern Israel after Hamas attacks in the kibbutz over the weekend. That has been confirmed by the Prime Minister's office. Let us go now to CNN's Hadass.
Okay, so now it is established as fact, according to the media. It has been confirmed, it's been reported, it's been confirmed that there were beheaded babies. And then very soon after this, there's even more confirmation as President Biden says he has seen pictures of Hamas terrorists beheading babies.
I've been doing this a long time. I never really thought that I would see and have confirmed pictures of terrorists beheading children. I never thought I'd ever, anyway.
I mean, God knows what Biden thinks he thought. So, given his mental state these days, I mean, this is interesting, right? He's talking about this, and then he kind of trails off. He says, "Oh well," and anyway, right? But he's saying, "I saw pictures." Actually, very soon after this, his office had to walk that back and said, "Actually, no." He was told that they were pictures. He actually hadn't seen them, even though he said he had, that he hadn't been. But it doesn't make any difference once these emotional accusations are made, they become fact. And pretty soon after this, it is then all over the media. It is all over global media, but especially American media. And I could play you some clips of that. And the fact that there's not many things that these days I could say, have you all heard of? But given the fact that almost all of you have heard of these 40 beheaded babies, that's how powerful the propaganda claim is. Of course, it's not only the media that does this. Social media also. One researcher found that there on Twitter or X, that there were 44 million tweets that mentioned beheaded babies, and that famous stars. There was an actor from called Noah Schnapp who acts in a program called Stranger Worlds, and then also the J.K. Rowling, the Harry Potter author, tweeted it out to their millions and millions of audiences. What's stunning about this, as we now know, is that this is complete and utter fabrication. The idea of beheaded babies is a complete fabrication. As an investigation by the Le Monde newspaper, the French paper, has shown, even the Israeli government press office says there were never 40 beheaded babies. And in fact, official Israeli sources who have been tasked with verifying the victims, who were the victims of October the 7th. We now know everyone who was killed on that day. And rather than the 1,400 that was initially reported, the number of people that were killed was 1,100, I think 1,169. Almost 600 of whom were soldiers or police people. So the number of civilians killed was less than 600. And within those 600, and they've all been identified, within those 600, there is one baby that was killed, along with a father in one of the kibbutzes. Not beheaded, but killed along with in one of these attacks. So any mention of beheaded babies is not just a little misinterpretation. It is complete and utter fabrication. Complete and utter fabrication. And so the question is, why? I mean, but it doesn't make any difference. People still believe it to this day. You talk to people now and they will still say there were 40 beheaded babies, even though, as I said, this is a complete and utter fabrication. In fact, when in the future, not too far into the future, but when people look back on this on October the 7th, one of the things that historians will point to is the level of misinformation and the level of just blatant lying there was by Israeli spokespeople, and the way that was picked up by their loyal stenographers in the Western media, and to give some voice to those claims. Now, it's not only there are, and to this then, to these gruesome stories, other stories get added. It's not just beheaded babies now. They are burning families. Now Hamas is burning families and children. They're piling their bodies up and burning them. They're getting pregnant women, and they're pulling, and they're stabbing them and pulling their fetuses out and stabbing the fetus. They are, I mean, the stories, you must have already heard them. They are, because they've been very, very widely shown are just gruesome to the extreme. And again, we have to ask, this is one of the things that you always have to ask, where did these come from? They're all fabrications. Okay, and I say that very confidently because we know what happened we know who the victims were, and we know the circumstances in which they died. One of the main people that has a role to play, that has a key role to play in this, is a guy called Yossi Landau, who works for an organization called Zaka. Now, Zaka is made up there, it's an organization of Orthodox Jews that was tasked by the Israeli government to clean up the bodies, the bodies that were found here. And it's very interesting. None of them have any forensic training, and yet they were the first people on the scene. And as the first people on the scene, they were able to give the first interpretation. In fact, this guy, I'll play you a clip from him in a second. His name is Yossi Landau. I mean, you most probably, if you've seen TV programs, or you know that being a forensic pathologist is incredibly difficult. You're faced with bodies, right? You're faced with, and then you have to figure out what happened, and it takes years and years of experience, of training and experience, to try and figure out what happened. And instead, what you have are these essentially religious fanatics who have become the first interpreters of this. And in fact, Yossi Landau, in a clip, which I have it somewhere, but I couldn't find it. He actually says, we're essentially using our imaginations. Now he says we see these bodies. They go in and they see these bodies, and we're using our imaginations to tell the story of what happened to them. And what an imagination he does have. He explicitly says we are telling, the bodies tell us stories. They're telling us stories. And essentially, these fanaticists and fantasists have become the initial definers of this. This is Yossi Landau, one of the claims that he makes.
Team. But in Kfar Aza and Be'eri, we're talking about a total of, I would say, about 280 bodies and 280 casualties. I would say 80% was torture. 80% of it was torture. And you're talking children, adults, children, when you're talking a pile, 2 piles, you found them in Be'eri, 2 piles of 10 children each were tied to the back, burned to death. This is something behind. This is next level.
Okay. We know that that's a lie. Okay, we know that's a lie because there was nothing like that found in any of the kibbutzes. Nothing like that. The bodies piled up and burnt. And remember what Hamas was doing. I mean, again, if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend. There's a film, an investigation by Al Jazeera. It's called October the 7th. It's on their site for free.
My card has been declined.
Sorry, was that? There is it's a film called October the 7th, and it's a forensic analysis, minute by minute, of what happened that day. And Hamas was involved in a military operation. Their aim was to get to the kibbutzes and to get as many hostages back as possible. They weren't stopping they didn't have the time to stop and torture people, and that wasn't what they were doing. And yet, Yossi Landau, this idea that is what happened, became quickly established as fact. Not only that,
Molly, your name is Jed, J-E-D?
This
Okay.
Sally,
Okay, I just got a
Mute.
new Bank of America card yesterday.
Jerry, mute
And
somebody.
it's not working.
Mute Molly.
I tried to activate it yesterday.
Yossi Landau also claimed that he saw a situation, or he came upon a
Yes.
situation where a family was having dinner, and that the Hamas terrorists broke in, and they killed and tortured the family, and then they sat down and started to have dinner, started to eat their dinner. I mean, these are such monsters that is what they will do. This is Antony Blinken repeating this story.
A family of four, a young boy and girl, 6 and 8 years old, and their parents around the breakfast table. The father, his eye gouged out in front of his kids. The mother's breast cut off. The girl's foot amputated. The boy's fingers cut off before they were executed. And then their executioners sat down and had a meal. That's what this society is dealing with. And no nation could tolerate that.
Right. So this is now the Secretary of State, right, now repeating this information as absolute, as fact. Now, there is big money to be made in this. The Zaka organization was actually almost bankrupt before October the 7th, but as a result of the publicity that came about this, they raked in something like $13 million in donations since then. One of their rival organizations, they wanted to get in on the act, on the fundraising act, a United Hatzalah, and they sent their executive director to Las Vegas to a Republican fundraising campaign. This is what he said about what he saw.
We saw the most horrific things. I saw in my own eyes a woman who was pregnant, 4 months pregnant. She was in a little village, a little kibbutz. They came into her house in front of her kids. They opened up her stomach. She was pregnant. They opened up her stomach, took out the baby and stabbed a little tiny baby in front of her and then shot her in front of her family. And then they killed the rest of the kids. These are not regular enemies. These are not regular situations. I saw little kids who are beheaded. We didn't know which head belongs to which kid. I was crying for 5 days straight. I couldn't get out. I couldn't stop crying.
Hey, remember, we know how many babies were killed on that day. We can name them. In fact, we can name the one. Her name was Mila Cohen, and she was killed along with her father at one of the kibbutzes. So anything that he is saying, as persuasive as he seems to cry on demand, is a complete and utter fabrication. And yet these fabrications, these lies, were lapped up by the media all around the world and quickly became established as fact. So that Hamas now is presented as these, not just and again, it's people, I recommend the film October the 7th from Al Jazeera, because it's really important to understand what actually happened on October the 7th. There was something very specific that happened. What was it that actually happened on October the 7th? And none of this took place in reality. But in the sphere of storytelling, in the sphere of news, Hamas are presented as animals. Now, the question for me is why? Because Hamas, there were atrocities committed on October the 7th. There was a killing of civilians, which is a war crime, by definition, a war crime. So there was lots of actual, real atrocities and war crimes that took place on October the 7th. Why do you feel the need to embellish them and to make things up in this way? And the reason is because Israel was going to do something. Israel had decided that they were going to finish what they started in 1948, which is the complete and utter destruction of Palestinian society. And for that, the propaganda had to be big. The propaganda had to be beheaded babies. The propaganda had to be burnt families. The propaganda had to be fetuses cut out of pregnant women and stabbed. The propaganda had to be mass rape to be able to justify the genocide that they were about to unfold, that they were about to unleash, and which they have since unleashed. And so in that sense, you have to turn Hamas from what it is, which is a national liberation organization, a national liberation party. In that way, the same as, if you want to look, they are equivalent to the ANC in South Africa. They are the equivalent to the IRA in Ireland. They are a national liberation organization. We have to turn them from something rational to something irrational. They have to turn them in the words of one Israeli minister. They become human animals. They're not like you and me, and as they're not like you and me, then we can do whatever we want to them. We can kill 40,000 of them, and the world will not bat an eyelid. Or, in fact, enough of the world will not bat an eyelid. And that genocide is ongoing. This is Netanyahu.
See, little savage attacks that Hamas perpetrated against innocent Israelis are mind-boggling. Slaughtering families in their homes, massacring hundreds of young people at an outdoor festival, kidnapping scores of women, children, and elderly, even Holocaust survivors. Hamas terrorists bound, burned, and executed children. They are savages. Hamas is ISIS. And just as the forces of civilizations united to defeat ISIS, the forces of civilization must support Israel in defeating.
Okay, hold on a second. I'm going to just get out of the screen sharing now. So can you see? I'm back now, right? You can see me now, or you can see there's a regular screen.
You look good.
Okay. So that again, why the atrocity? Why the need to invent these incredible, monstrous acts? And that was because there was something monstrous that Israel was going to do, and which they have been doing since then. If I had more time, I've run out of time. I'm happy to take questions on this. I could just very, very quickly, this was the first stage, beheaded babies, burnt bodies, fetuses cut out, etc. That was the first stage. But around the end of November, the public opinion, especially in the US and especially among liberals, was starting to go down. And so what they needed at that point was a new form of propaganda, and that was the mass rape story that was propagated. Again, it was very interesting. Frank Luntz, who is a Republican pollster, does a lot of polling for Israel. He was polling American audiences immediately after October the 7th. And when he asked them, what is the worst thing that Hamas could be accused of doing? The thing that came to the top of that was sexual violence. That was the worst thing that Americans said Hamas could do. And that is why you then have the next stage of the propaganda, which is this idea that Hamas used rape as a weapon of war. This culminated in the New York Times story, Screams Without Words, and then in a video by Sheryl Sandberg as well on the same thing. But it's a continuation of the atrocity campaign, because you have to stop Americans, especially, thinking about Palestinians in human ways. You have to get them instead to think about them as the Israeli minister said, as human animals, the same as ISIS, and therefore you can do whatever you want to them. If you wanted one indication of this, very quickly, very briefly, and then I'll stop and I'll take questions. When Israel rescued those 4 hostages, it killed 270 Palestinians, and the world celebrated. 4 hostages that could have been released through negotiations. And instead, 270 civilians dead. That is how little Palestinians are worth to the American, to the Western imagination. It's worth I'm working, as I said, I'm working on a film on this. And whenever you see stories around this, remember there is nothing innocent. The stories the stories you hear about this, the news you hear about this goes through a very specific filter. And that filter is dominated by not the Jewish lobby, but the Israel lobby, which is made up of the military-industrial complex. It's made up of Christian Zionists. It's made up of lots of other people. And they're the ones who control the story to stop Americans thinking in thinking in rational ways, thinking in sympathetic ways. It's working less and less. Public opinion is now essentially, this is now destroyed. I think Israel is now destroyed. It has become a pariah state in the rest of the world, and even in the United States, by generation, the younger generation has been lost, and young Jews especially have been lost on this. The main people who were involved in the campus protests were non-Zionist Jews. And that is a nightmare for Israel, which is why they are clamping down so hard on the protests. At the university I work at, I still teach there, there were 135 arrests at a peaceful encampment. And the question is why? Why are they arresting people in a peaceful encampment? And it's because they want to make sure that people get the message that there is a cost to speaking out. They are the students that were arrested on that day. They are being stopped from graduating. Seniors who had completed all their work are being stopped from graduating. The question again is, why is this so central? So let me stop there. So I could go on a little bit more, but I'm sure you have questions.
Yeah, using the electronic hands up is a good move. Cindy? Sound on.
First of all, thank you so much for speaking with us today, Sut Jhally. I really appreciate it. I'm familiar with your work with the Media Education Foundation going back many, many years, and just have always admired it so much. I wanted to let you know that your film, The Occupation of the American Mind, was shown here in Ventura by a group that meets weekly at my house, Venturans for a Just Palestine. So it is being used to further your work, and if with your permission, I'll put it on our local TV station here. I wanted to ask you, I thank you for laying out the story as it really occurred, and exposing the truth on what's going on with Israel's propaganda campaign. And I was hoping maybe you could speak a little further about how that intersects with U.S. propaganda. We know that the United States has 2 bases in Israel. I also wanted to recall your attention to the story that came out of Kuwait with Nicera speaking publicly about babies being thrown out of incubators, which was a propaganda campaign to get us on board with that war. And I think this is probably relevant with everywhere we've been in. There's been all kinds of propaganda. So I was hoping you could align what you're saying about Israel's campaign with US propaganda. Thank you very much.
Sure. Well, the 2 points there. The first one is this: whenever you start hearing the dead babies come out, you know something bad is about to happen, right? As and again, as you mentioned, when on the first Gulf War, so this would have been 1991, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, American public opinion was very lukewarm to intervening against Saddam Hussein. There was not a lot of pro-war sentiment at that point, and the American public had to be convinced to go along. And one of the ways they were convinced was through dead babies. There was a story that Iraqi troops had gone into hospitals in, I think, Kuwait City, and had taken babies out of incubators and had left them on the floor to die. And that turned around public opinion. The senior Bush used it a lot in his speech, and pretty soon there was support for the war. It was only afterwards we found out this was the result, literally, of a public relations campaign. And the main witness, her name was Naira, was the daughter of the American, the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States, who was, telling this hard story. But again, this is one of the things. By the time the truth is told, it's too late. It's already done its work. The propaganda has already done its work, as it has in this case. What Israel needed was they needed political space to be able to operate without opposition. And the beheaded babies and the mass rape stories gave them that political space, especially in the United States. It gave them that political space. So every time that their babies come out, you know something very, very bad is about to happen. Because it is in the First World War, the same thing. Germans bayoneting babies was a propaganda trope to get a reluctant American population to go along with the war. The second point you made about American propaganda, there is no distinction between American propaganda and Israeli propaganda. They're part of one structure. Again, that's why Israeli propaganda is so effective. It's not that that they brainwash people. It's because they work hand in hand with their American partners. And they work hand in hand with American elites. They work hand in hand with Christian Zionists around this. And so it is not just Israeli propaganda. It is the fact that everything else around it supports the same thing. They have the same interests. American elites have the same interests in the Middle East, or that Israel does. And therefore Israel is really, the 51st state of the United States. I think Biden actually must be quite chagrined. He should have realized that if he really wanted power in America, he should become president. He should become prime minister of Israel. That's where the real power actually resides. It's not with him. It's really a pathetic sight right now, watching the American president, trying to hold back this, this genocidal monster and not being able to do a thing and ultimately they can't do a thing because their interests align. Their strategic interests align.
Judith, turn your microphone on.
Listen, you're talking to Mona. There you go.
No, she had a hand up.
Yeah, so my chief sources of news are MSNBC and the Seattle Times, and I never heard anything about the babies, the murdering of babies. I only heard that Hamas had attacked Israel, and in impossibly horribly retaliation, totally out of balance retaliation, they killed 40,000 Palestinians. And my sympathies have always been with the Palestinians completely. And I've been horrified that our government gave weapons to Israel to do this. And so I don't know where this public opinion thing you're getting. Maybe it's coming from other sources besides mine, but I was not in line with the thinking that you thought Americans were. That's all I wanted to say.
Hello.
You're unusual in that way. All I would say is MSNBC is part of the same structure. Okay, you got Fox for the Democrats and for the Republicans, and you have MSNBC for the Democrats. But on this issue, Democrats and Republicans are united. and you will have the same. The MSNBC is no different. Rachel Maddow, the great liberal darling, she is silent on Israel. She is silent on this. It is one of the most shameful things for. But that's a typical thing. Is there is a name for it. It's called PEP, Progressive Accept Palestine. This is what unites. So, and I'm sure the Seattle Times would have been the same. I'm sure if you'd have looked at the AP report, reports and the other reports, it would have been the same thing. So, you're unusual in not being able to, not being exposed to those stories.
I have a point to make and a question to ask. The question is, does our speaker think that the stories we've gotten about Hamas surrounding buildings with civilians when they know the Israelis are coming to get the people inside, does that make sense to you?
I mean, this is another Israeli propaganda ploy, right? Because they're going to destroy everything, and so everything has to be. Everything has to be about Hamas, and if you can turn Hamas into these monsters that will sacrifice their own civilians, their own people for this, then it shows what monsters they are. Yeah, okay. Remember, Gaza is a tiny strip of land that has 2 million people in it, right? Well, how you can separate out, and Hamas is remember, they were elected, and Hamas has a popular base, that they are a resistance movement that comes from the people. And so this idea that they have human shields is a way of demonizing Hamas. And has nothing to do with the reality of it. In one sense, it's Israel is projecting what it does. I mean, again, it's significant that next to the bases. Remember when those Hamas fighters broke across the border to those bases and killed about 600 soldiers. And again, Israel was humiliated that day, and part of the retaliation is what happens when you humiliate an abuser. They react. They react in these extreme ways. But they surrounded those bases with kibbutzes, with kibbutzim. So if you were going to attack the base, you were bound to have civilian casualties, right? In that sense, Israel's claim that Hamas uses human shields is a justification for being able to kill anyone they want in Palestine, in Gaza, and blame Hamas for it. So no, I don't think there's anything. I think it's just simply a propaganda.
Thank you. The point I wanted to make, though, is that I was a Zionist in the 40s. And by 1954, I realized what Israel was doing to not the settlers, to the Palestinians in the West Bank. And I've been opposed to what Israel has been doing, and not only what Israel has been doing, but our taxes have been paying for the destruction of Palestinian people. And it's so awful. I'm finished.
Yeah. Thank you. Again, I think there's lots of people with your story. One of the people that I found the most powerful to listen to is Gabor Mate, who is the world-renowned specialist on trauma, who was like you, said, I used to be a Zionist. I believed all the stories of, of all the myths of Zionism. And then I went to the West Bank. And then I went to see, and then I saw how the Palestinians were treated. And that is, and Gabor Mate is now one of the most kind of outspoken Jewish people talking about this issue. And again, that is very, I mean, people like you are very dangerous to Israel. In fact, they've identified that in fact, the most dangerous people to Israel are Israelis or Jews who oppose what Israel does.
Right.
Dean, can you unmute?
I can. Well, thank you for coming. I find nothing that you said to be surprising. I'm 78 and have been listening to propaganda almost since I was born in 1945. We've had a variety of scares, the yellow scare, the perils, the domino theory. We've been pretty much at war since 1945 with a variety of societies. And the first thing that always happens, like I think back to the Russian Revolution thereafter, the first thing the Russians did, the communists did, was to take control of the press. Now, why did they take control of the press? Because they wished to read the sports pages? I don't think so. It's because they wish to publish stories similar to this. Now, the stories change, but they're all tailored to motivate the public, their readers, about what they want to do. But my real concern in all this is peace in Israel, Palestine, one state, two states. I realize that you can never have a one-state solution because there are more Palestinians, and if you give them the vote, they would vote the Israelis out of Israel. So what do you see as the ultimate end game for the Palestinians here? They have been treated horribly since 1948 and before, probably. But I want to know, how do we get to a state where people are not killing one another? We're not hearing these terrible stories. And we have to arrive at some basis for getting along. What do you think?
Of course, I mean, I don't have some magic, theory for that happens, but it's the work from principle, right? It's to ensure, this is the phrase, is to ensure that everyone from the river to the sea is treated equally. Now, that could involve a number of different scenarios, whether it's one state, one state maybe with federations, or I mean, there's all kinds of different ways of doing it. But the objection to that right now is Israel, right? The objection to that is Netanyahu, who has said he doesn't even want to. I mean, there is one state at the moment. Right now, Israel is the one state. It controls from the river to the sea. It's not a democratic state. It has to occupy half. That's one reality. The question is, can you have a democratic state? I'm sure you can, but it requires people who are willing to go for that goal of having a democratic state in a region where there is lots of difference. How do you live with difference? Other societies have done it. It's happened in Ireland. It's happened in Northern Ireland.
Well, that's right. And Netanyahu has no interest in achieving peace, because then he will be going back to court to face the charges against him that have not been resolved. So he has a personal interest in continuing the war. And he also hopes, I believe, that Trump is elected, because Trump has said that he's with the Israelis, right or wrong. So for those of us who are listening, when you vote for Trump, you're voting for the Zionists in Israel. Thank you.
Would any of us listening vote for Trump? I don't think so.
But that is an issue with the specific issue of Biden, and who to vote for. I mean, but the question I would have, is like, how would Trump be any worse than Biden? But on the Palestinian issue, how would Trump be any worse than Biden?
On this issue, probably not a lot worse. On other issues, there's a vast difference.
No, I understand they're not the same, but on this issue.
No, I say on this issue, there's less difference than.
I mean, I think Biden is going to, well, if he's allowed to stay in the race, I think he will lose, and he will lose partly because of his stance on this, because there are millions of people, progressives, who they won't vote for Trump, but they won't vote for Biden either. There are Arab Americans, Muslim Americans who will not vote for Biden, no matter what, given what he has done, what he has made possible this time.
So is that a vote for Trump?
Well, I think you've got to. No,
That's a vote for Trump.
A vote for, if I was, when I'm voting, I'm going to vote for Cornel West.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine, and that's still a vote for Trump.
Okay, here's the deal. We're going off topic here because this is a religious nonpartisan group, theoretically, although we all know, I think, where most of us stand. But I wanted to comment, I'm a member of Northern New Jersey JVP, although I am an atheist, UU by religion. And we have had the pushback. We have had our events canceled. We have gone to talk to Quakers and they said, oh, wait a minute, we don't think we can talk to you. The interreligious group, says you're terrorists and JVP is run from Lebanon. And I mean, it's wild out there. So.
Yeah, I mean, but that part of that is that there is a backlash, and the reason there's a backlash is because they are worried. They are scared stiff. And I think especially of groups like JVP or Not in Our Name, etc., because it breaks the lie that all Jews are Zionists, and that's the great lie that that Netanyahu somehow represents all Jews. And the fact that there is huge opposition from non-Zionist Jews is really a threat to him. And so it doesn't, the backlash does not surprise me because it is an existential threat to Israel. As I said, that's why you have these extreme reactions to the campus protests. I mean, it's partly symbolic. They want to make sure that people understand that that you cannot break on this issue. You cannot. I mean, again, it's really astounding if you think about it that Americans can't criticize a foreign government without the risk now of getting arrested, without the risk of losing their job, without the risk. Like, you can't criticize. You can criticize any other American you want. You can criticize Trump. You can criticize anything. Don't criticize Israel. I mean, it's really, mind-boggling, the trick that has been foisted on Americans. But it's, as I said, I think it's breaking down. I think they're losing that battle, and the more they're losing, the more desperate they are, and the more vicious they will become.
But I also think of Julian Assange deciding he had to for his own health and safety, and God bless him for that, plead guilty under the Espionage Act. He did not have First Amendment protections as a foreigner. We may not either.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Assange, I mean, I'm really happy he did what, he made the deal that he did. No one deserves to be treated that way.
What is your suggestion for organizations like ours to protest the media distortion that you've very well described? Is there anything we can do as protest or lobbying to make a difference?
Not really. I mean, I think the best thing, I mean, because they're just set up they're set up to ignore you. You can write letters, you can do whatever else you want, but it's not even a matter of individual reporters, because this is a structural issue. This is system wide. So I think the best thing you can do is actually to deconstruct the propaganda and to support other groups. I think that is the best place to put limited energy that we have. Is you can't fight the propaganda because they're just too powerful, and you can't have counter propaganda, but you can break down their propaganda. And that is actually what I've actually spent my kind of career doing, is to take the propaganda of the corporate world and to turn it against itself. And I think once you can do that, then people won't be able to see the propaganda for what it is. You can't really have a counter propaganda because you don't have the resources for that. But you can use, it's like a jujitsu master. Use the power that comes to you against them, and then support other groups. Support groups like the Electronic Intifada, like Mondowise, like Democracy Now, other independent media that tell a different kind of story.
And you can vote. Don't ever forget that you can vote out the politicians that are in Washington this November.
If they run.
Kathleen?
Well,
Yes, you can
would
also
you-
use the social media accounts. If you don't have one, get multiple ones, and blast and circulate all day long.
Yeah, I mean, actually, on this,
connect with other groups too on social media.
On this, what's really interesting is there was a conversation between Mitt Romney and Anthony Blinken at the McCain Foundation a couple of months ago. And they were complaining, and essentially Blinken was complaining. He said, in the old days, we used to have 3 channels, and then, we used to have ABC, NBC, CBS, and then you could read the New York Times and the Washington Post and perhaps a couple of other things, but it was much easier to control. And he said, nowadays, you can't control it. Social media means you can't control it. And if, in fact, people can get their news not just from the 3 networks, they can get their news from Al Jazeera. They can get their news from around the world, and that is what they're using. And that is why TikTok is being banned. It's being banned not because the Chinese have some great influence on the American public. It's being banned because it is too pro-Palestinian. And again, Mitt Romney, when he was talking to Anthony Blinken, actually said that explicitly. He said, there's so much pro-Palestinian content, but we're talking to the president. We're going to take care of this. We're going to make sure that TikTok isn't allowed to do what it's what it's doing. So social media is not some great panacea. I don't want to, but it is less able to be controlled, and especially for young people, it's less able to be controlled. And so I agree with you. I think we should use whatever resources we have to be able to get out information that might be useful.
Okay, I think we've explored this as much as we can in the 1 hour we allotted for it. Thank you very much, Professor Jhally.
Okay, thank you.
It's been great listening to what you have to say, and I think most of us have some awareness that this was going on, although I hadn't heard about the babies. I had heard about the rape, and it didn't sound right in the first place, and you want to look at wartime news as being propaganda and take it with a grain of salt, because it's going to do whatever the suppliers of that information want it to do.
She still has her hand up. Let's find out if she's really something to say.
Oh, Kathleen has it up again. Okay.
Well,
Yeah,
she's
well,
something, but
Kathleen.
Where can we find the video? I saw this is being recorded. Where can we get that?
Oh, it will be on UUJEC's YouTube channel. It will take a couple days. Our administrator is in Houston helping with Bertha, the hurricane. And I don't know when she'll have time to do it, but we'll get it up within a week, I would assume.
And you said what channel?
The YouTube channel.
Yeah, what is it called?
It's UUJEC.
You'll find it.
Wait, your speech is muffled, so it's not coming clearly what you're saying.
Sorry. Here, this might help. It's UUJEC's YouTube channel.
UUJEC?
Yeah, that's her organization.
You use for Just Economic Community.
That's us.
Can you get there through the web page too, Terry?
I'm not sure.
Putting it on the UUJEC.net site, but after it goes up to YouTube, it'll be on YouTube first.
If you Google YouTube, it'll take you to the page and go to the search and go UUJEC, and that'll take you to our page. Okay, I think we're ready to share the screen.
To conduct
See
business.
if I can find it. Document Word.
Can you share it?
Just a second. It's not what it's supposed to do.
Yeah,
Here
you're
we
gonna start
are.
so if you're gonna start your meeting now, I'll take my leave right now. Okay. Thanks very
Okay.
much.
Thanks, Chet.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay. And well, okay, I heard Kit telling us how to do it.
Well, this is a PDF, and we were using a PowerPoint.
Okay.
But certainly, there's something on PowerPoint, like if you double click on the page or something like that, that it will close off. Actually, drag the menu.
I've got it up, ready to share if you want.
You want to do that?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead. I will stop sharing.
Okay. So welcome.
Great.
Here is our agenda.
Okay.
Finance Task Force General Assembly, summer repeat, and closing discussion and reading. We've heard from Professor Jhally. Jane, over to you for finance.
Yes, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm Jane Banner. I'm the co-treasurer of UUJEC, and I'm just going to briefly report on our finances. As perhaps you can see, for the past 2 years, or for 2021 and 2022, both our expenses and income have been somewhat decreased because of COVID. We are starting to come out of it. In 2023, we spent approximately $6,500 more than we took in, but thanks to grants from the UU funding program and from Side with Love, we did conduct a lobbying effort in Washington, D.C., along with our partners, the UUs for Social Justice and the UU Ministry for Earth, to support a climate-friendly farm bill, and it came in virtually the way we budgeted it. We expenses pretty much equaled income. That's one of the reasons that we're showing more income for 2023, because of the grants to run the conference. So far in 2024, we continue to run a deficit, so it's not good. Anyone who'd like to make a contribution, please go to our website and do so. But it's not too unusual at the beginning of the year for our expenses to be above our income. Our main fundraiser is yes, the next slide, great. Our main fundraiser is a solicitation that comes at the end of the year. So generally expenses or income catches up toward the end of the year. What this chart shows is our balanced budget anyway of $13,908 for this year. So far, which is through June, we've raised $2,500 approximately in income and spent approximately $5,700. So that's pretty much it. Now turn it to others.
During this year, I was able to attend a fundraising program by Kim Klein, thanks to the generosity of the UU funding program. And we will be implementing some of my learnings about, better building relationships. And one thing Jane is really good at is getting the thank you notes out, but we need to take the next step. And so you'll be hearing from us that we'll be building relationships, not just asking for handouts. So. Any questions on finance before we move on?
Well, I just would like to say that the UUSJ has been conducting a fundraising campaign for the last 2 months. It wanted to raise $25,000 and it had a $12,500 match program. However, in the last 2 months, it has raised $4,200.
Ooh. Oh,
so
great.
And so I'm thinking that I understand we've been doing a lot of different things like outreach, calling people, sending information to people about what they'd like to see done and getting information back. But right now, we have not been getting the kind of dollars that we would like to see back. So I understand what they tell you at those fundraising seminars, but they don't all apply. They are not just magic. It depends.
Oh, for sure not. For sure not.
It depends upon whether or not what we're offering is what our clientele, our outreach people want to see. So having contact and gathering information about what they wanted us to do is as important as to us telling them what we want to do, which is not what they want to do necessarily.
Judy Deutsch would like to say something. As a contributor, I find that I'm giving less to organizations this year because I feel I need to give so much more to the candidates that I want elected. And that may be true of other people. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, we sent a good deal of money to the World Kitchen Organization because what was going on in Gaza. They were the ones that were under attack by IDF for bringing in food and so forth. Some of their workers were, I think, killed or injured. I don't remember which.
Yes.
But there's a lot of places out there that are asking for money. I get at least a dozen requests per day from President Biden telling me all sorts of things, from asking me to kick in $2 to 200 or 200,000, whichever.
Right. One of the things that came up at the conference was the proliferation of the NGOs and how many more there are than there used to be, and all need money to run.
Yeah. Right.
Healthcare. Judy, do you want to talk about the healthcare task force? I just put some notes together.
Well, I think one of the things that we really still have to work on is the corporate ownership of Medicare Advantage, and how we can end that. I don't know, but we need to keep working on that. The other thing is the pharmacy benefit managers. If Trump is elected, all the work that Biden did to see that we pay less for pharmaceuticals, including insulin, will be gone, and it's terrible. I don't know what happened just recently in California. I do know that they have voted for something that's supposed to get single payer eventually in California. And I hope that our committee will be working on finding out what actually is happening. Healthcare now that I used to work on a great deal when I was in Massachusetts and still support, is doing a great deal to get single payer. However, I think they're doing something very stupid currently that they've done many years before, which is get non-binding resolutions voted on within various districts in the state. I think they should work for binding resolutions, but I'm not voting there now. I'm no longer on the board. And there is a group called HCR4US, Healthcare R for Us, that came out of a League of Women Voters meeting, I'll say 10 years ago. The League of Women Voters principles include single payer, but the board year after year after year refuses to work for single payer. And this is the HCR4US is a group that tries to get the National League to work for single payer. And I think it would be helpful if it did. I no longer give money to the National League of Women Voters. I'm an active member of the league, locally and statewide, and I tell every time I'm asked to give money to the national, I say, as soon as you work for single payer, I will, but they don't.
There is a new report out from the FTC on the pharmacy benefit managers. I haven't had a chance to go over it yet, but I did see that the conclusion is that they need urgent investigation into possible conflicts of interest. Well, it didn't need 2 years for me to know that, but the new FTC person is actually pretty good. So see what happens with that. Yeah, and the Healthcare Now is they have a podcast that are done by the leaders that they're looking for more researchers and video people or audio people to help with that. And if anybody's interested, we can share that. And we're working, the retiree organization for the public workers in New York had a court victory keeping their traditional Medicare. It's being appealed by the mayor, of course, so keep posted, but yeah, we keep plugging away. Any comments, questions?
Well, I was going to say that our speaker said he's voting for Cornell West. And let's see, before I left Massachusetts, I did listen to Cornell West a great deal. We're both members of the Democratic Socialists of America. And he certainly is for single payer. But I think that voting for him is a vote for Trump. And I think it's very sad. Okay.
Okay, yeah, and the other controversy in the healthcare advocacy world is, do we fight for national single payer only, or do we encourage the state-based programs? Because we know if it's all state-based, there's going to be states that will just turn it over to the private folks entirely. On the other hand, we've been trying for a national program for 100 years and we've only got halfway there. So anyway.
Well, in Massachusetts, I was chair of the committee that wrote 3 or 4 bills for single payer in Massachusetts. And I guess we never won. I still believe, however, that if states can do it individually, great, because it'll be forever before we get national.
Our next task force is now called Peace, Equity, Climate. Used to be the Green New Deal Task Force. Lucy or Cindy, you want to?
I'll start and Cindy will follow me. We changed the name in large part to make it very clear what our priorities are. And in this time, peace in the world and peace among us locally is essential. Equity is essential because people will not work even on climate if they cannot afford their bills. And we, as an organization, economic justice has been our central concern. And of course, climate has reached the point where it's really the tipping point. And any of you who are in one of the climate disaster areas or heat areas or flooding areas are very aware of it, though not everyone is in such danger. But we have reached the point that if we do not change the greenhouse gas emissions immediately, we have passed the tipping point. So I want to say that up front. We certainly welcome anyone to join the task force, and please bring your concerns to it. And we will work on legislation federally, but we have to take all the presidency, the Senate, and the House in order to get any decent legislation passed. So it's not just the presidency, it's all up and down. And so the election is just vital right now. So we welcome you, and I want to turn it over to Cindy, who will say some more about her priorities for the task force.
Hi, everybody. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. Could we change screens there, you guys? Okay, so thank you. I want to thank all of the people that really put so much work into this meeting. Sally, Terry, Carl for getting Professor Jhally and all that was done. So thank you very much for that. I want to underscore what Lucy's saying to us about the urgency. I think I told our UUJEC group months back that we had been forewarned that we were going to reach the 1.5 level of temperature increase over pre-industrial times by May. That was a projection by James Hansen, and we have. We are at 1.5 degree rise in temperature now and have been for the last year. There may be a dip in that going forward. Hopefully there will be, but it's projected to come right back. It's a temporary dip. Anyway, climate could not be more serious. I'm very grateful that so many UUs across the country are really involved in climate. I think that's wonderful. But there has been a hesitancy to look at the military and war impacts, which have been 5.5% of the global whole for years now, and that does not include war-related emissions. So I was hoping that anyone who is on this call, Molly, Rebecca, Stephanie, Wynn, Chris, Carol, Steve, Kathleen, Doug, if you're still here, that you might consider joining this task force and helping us spread the need to address the military aspects and how that is impacting our climate, both financially with the U.S. budget going more than 50% of our discretionary budget every year going to the DoD, which takes away funding that's badly needed for climate mitigation and adaptation, and also the impacts of the military that the military is having on the climate. So we look forward to working with Lucy, and I think David Delk is also going to share leadership, Lucy, David, and I on this, and Mona bringing in the aspect of particularly on nuclear weapons, the expenses of that and how that's putting us in jeopardy. So I have high hopes. I think we really need to reach out as a task force to this UU Service Committee. They've got wonderful stuff up on their website about militarism, and that's not really being included in the climate change revival that's coming up in September. I was reluctant to join that group because they are not considering militarism and wars as part of the climate concerns, and I'm hoping that maybe this task force can help and broaden their perspective. So thank you all very much. I appreciate you. Take care. And are there any questions, I guess?
Thank you. Sally, do you want to put up the screen share?
Okay. Carl, as we mentioned earlier, is in Kenya and couldn't be with us. He is the chairperson of our reparations task force. And I've listed some of the presentations and meetings he has done and given primarily in his local Massachusetts area. We are looking for more groups, UUs and others, to have presentations and to continue their curriculum work. And we will keep you apprised. We do have an email, reparations@uujec.org, and a forum on our uujec.net site. I will talk more about that a bit later. So stay tuned. Anybody else have something to add? No, okay. General Assembly was all virtual, and I thought Bob might be here to talk about the action of immediate witness that he and a bunch of other Floridians primarily put forward, which got a 95% vote: World on Fire, humanitarian work, and climate change. Cindy just pointed out how hot it is. I saw in the paper here that last summer was the second hottest in 129 years. That goes back to 1895. There are, consider, can your building be a cooling center? Can you, what can this action of immediate witness, this calls for people to actually get out and help with the survival work that folks need, and the climate activism as well. There, I have a link to the full text there on our site. It's also on the UUA website. We had 2 workshops at GA, organizing for health. Oh, I thought I had. I think if I. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. The workshop organizing for health equity. I have the speakers list there. I was one of them speaking on maternal health and including the racial discrepancy in maternal deaths, which is a focus of our First Lady, who should stick out of that and not run for governor or not run for senator. But Lisa talked about her work in Florida and including gardening and food nutrition type things. We talked about, again, we talked about congregational actions. We talked about how to help the houseless, both the need for affordable housing and the now criminalization in some places of sleeping outside, which is, it's upsetting to walk past a bunch of people sleeping on the street, but it's worse if you have to be that person sleeping on the street. We need solutions for those folks, not to criminalize them. That video, like the one from Sustaining and Growing Democracy in 2024, will be up on our UJEC website as soon as the UUA releases it to us in December. Right now, it is available to registered GA attendees somewhere on the UUA site. Dean, not to put you on the spot, do you want to talk a little bit? You were one of the speakers at this workshop. Say a few words.
Yeah, we're heavily involved. As some of you may know, I'm one of the 3 people who are leading the State Action Network in Virginia. So we've taken on the role of getting out the vote in Virginia. We are not working with UUA, although we do postcarding that we get from the grassroots, Restore Our Vote, I believe. We get addresses and they send postcards to other states. But in Virginia, we didn't expect to see UU the vote come in because it's not a state with a lot of problems like Florida or Georgia or Arizona. The issues that they have there are different. Abortion is an issue amongst women in Virginia, but it was not amongst the things that were up for even discussion at the last General Assembly. When I say General Assembly, I mean the General Assembly in Virginia. That's what they call the Senate and the House of Delegates. So we have been doing training. We work with the RE Project, if you know that, the first, I think it's All Souls in Washington. They've held several trainings. We intend to have sessions throughout the summer into the fall where people from various churches can come and ask questions about the various things that can be done, or they don't know how to do them and they want to do them, and we can put them together with people who know how to do those sorts of things. We have a person who is now hired by the RE Project to assist others in getting out the vote. We are in the process of getting a grant. One of our churches, a couple of members from one of the churches wants to get a grant for postcarding. So he says, these 2 guys say that they can go to the UUA, get $1,500, and for those churches who need money to do postcarding, we can pass out the money. That's not hard to do. So we're in the process of doing that. Even though we are a nonpartisan organization, we do believe in A, getting out the vote, B, using what's called the VAN system to find out. In Virginia, there's a system that will allow the churches to determine whether or not all of their members are registered to vote. So we put the name of the church in, we get the information back, and we nudge people to go to the registrar's office, although in Virginia, you can register in the same day you can vote. We also have grant money available to those who need vans from their churches to the polls. So we'll be using that. But that's kind of where we are. And of course, I point out to people that getting out the vote doesn't mean that you're getting out all the vote. Now, I'm a Pittsburgh guy. And when I grew up, if we wanted to get people elected, i.e. Democrats, the buses would go down to the Union Hall. They would pick up the workers and they would take them to the polls. Somehow they never made it to the country club to pick up those who were playing golf or sitting in the bar. I guess they never could figure out where the country club was, but they made no effort to get those people down to the polls. We expect to send our get out the vote effort into areas in which we have a greater hope that we'll get people to support the candidates that we want. We won't ever say who the candidates are. If you can't figure out from using your own UU values and you're in the poll who to vote for, well, there's not much I can do for you other than return to the good old days when we stuck a gun in your ear or gave you $2 for a drink. But we're not going to do either one of those last 2. They seem to be illegal these days, unfortunately. So that's the plan. And I strongly recommend that when we have a problem with people, like we talked about before, with the propaganda coming out, that you take a look at the positions of the candidates who are running and decide who you want to vote for. We also will do pamphlets in which we put the picture there. We'll ask people questions, get their answers, and write it down. We don't try to change whatever a candidate says. We'll just write it down, and you can read what they've said. And if you can't figure out what to do, well, I'm sorry for you. There's not much else I can do for you. So that's what we're doing in Virginia. And hopefully you can do something like that in your own states. But don't believe that you can't do anything, because there's always something that can be done even in your local churches or in your neighborhoods.
Thank you. I know here at Central Unitarian, we are writing postcards for Reclaim Our Vote, and I just realized that postcard rates go up tomorrow, so we missed. If we didn't buy them ahead of time, we're buying more expensive stamps next week. Sorry for lack of notice.
We think all this works. Otherwise, why would we spend so much time doing it?
Yeah. All right.
Any questions?
Questions, comments?
I have a question that may sound rude, but I did, well, 2 years ago, I wrote an AIW that the General Assembly passed. I think it was against Medicare Advantage. But this year, I gave the board a Saving Our Democracy AIW, and I never heard what happened to it. I asked a couple of times, and if you people know, I would like to know.
It wasn't accepted by the commission.
It was, oh, you mean it was submitted? I didn't
It was
even...
submitted. My understanding is that they said it was too close to a previous one, but we did have the Sustaining Growing Democracy workshop.
Right, which was good.
Right, and yeah. So
okay, thank you.
Work into that, yes.
I didn't know that it was submitted even, because I thought it was too long and that the board might edit it, but I didn't hear anything, but until now. So thank you.
And my little last comment here, it is not partisan to support our Constitution.
No.
This is more details
Well,
on.
It could get that way, however.
No, it could not. The Constitution is the founding document, and there it is. We kind of talked about the AIW on World on Fire. Something from an article that Terry found that related to our conference. Most farm worker fatalities happen in the first week of work. So if employers would give new employees an acclimation period, they could literally save lives. So that's a labor thing that we can actually work for. Maybe something we could talk about on Labor Day. And also the fact that energy justice means that if you live in a really hot climate, you need more energy for air conditioning, same way as those in the cold need more energy for heating in the winter. But those of us who have a bit more and, have an extra car and take the extra airplane trip, we can surely cut back. So, equity. So our conference, we had an excellent conference. We had 3 days at All Souls. We went to the Hill on the last day and went to Senate offices. We had some really great speakers. I've put a list of our partners in the conference and our speaker organizations in the slide there. The one thing that didn't work for us was the technology. We were hoping that the evening sessions at least could be virtual or could be hybrid. It didn't happen. Opportunity lost, what can I say? But for those of us on the ground who were there, it was a really good and informative event. The Farm Bill is not done yet. Here it is, almost a year later, they're still negotiating and talking, and Republicans primarily are trying to remove money from some of the climate related programs and put them into the crop subsidy programs, which basically help the corporate monoculture farmers. So there's still much to do, but to be continued. This summer, we've got a lot going on. I've been to the Summer of Heat actions at Citigroup for the last day of the Gulf South event, where we had brass band, second line New Orleans style march up to Citigroup, where 68 people were arrested. I was not one of them this time. The first week they had 3 rocking chairs from the Rocking Chair Rebellion, along with 60 odd people arrested. I think they're up to 300 and some arrests, and they are finding that Bloomberg had an article saying how, the Citigroup workers are being disrupted, and there was some weak statement that the CEO or one of the executives made in support of mitigating their climate policy a little bit. So they are feeling the heat, and we're halfway through. It's a 12-week action. The week 8, the July 29th to August 3rd, is the Faith and Climate Grief Week. So we're going to look, I think, at getting the word out about that. Yes, most of it's in New York at Citigroup headquarters, but there are ways to call and ways to take action locally. Today is National Green Amendment Day. It's, I think, the 3rd or 4th year in a row for that. New Jersey's Green Amendment is still in committee. New York's passed, but the governor is now saying, well, it's discretionary. No constitution is discretionary. That's why you put it in the Constitution, because that's the bottom line law. So they were up in Albany yesterday working on that. And then next up is the UU Ministry for Earth Climate Justice Revival. So you can sign up to get resources for that. I think we will work with Cindy to remind them that military has a big impact. I personally want to make sure that they realize that nuclear is a climate victim, not a climate solution. Those reactors live on water that is rising, that is sometimes too hot to actually be used to cool the reactors, and that create waste that doesn't go anywhere. So we need better solutions. Not to throw massive monies into things like Vogtle in Georgia, where ratepayers are now paying for a reactor that I don't know if it's working at all, but no. So that's kind of my comments on climate. Lucy?
Yeah, I want to emphasize doing things locally when we get discouraged about federally. And whether we're talking about the farming, anything to support local farms, urban farms, gardening yourself, CSAs. It's going, in the end, we're going to be solving our survival more locally, I'm afraid, given the current trend. And one other thing on climate I want to bring up, just to say it, is that artificial intelligence is now using an enormous amount of energy, and it's just beginning to get national coverage. I did see something in the New York Times on it lately, but it's been hidden. And the major companies that you're on social media with, like, Microsoft, Google, and all the ones that I'm not part of, so I don't know their names even. They are using AI, and we are using AI, and we could use it more. And it would seem like easy to just get more searching because of AI. But every time it's used, it uses energy. And those companies that had goals for the climate, that they would reduce their use of greenhouse gas energy, are going the wrong way. They are actually using much more than they have before, not reducing to their own goals. So please keep that in mind as we go forward. AI is not just a wonderful information service, it's also robbing our chances on climate.
As are cryptocurrencies, and unfortunately AI makes disinformation very easy, even more so than real.
Yeah, but you're not focused in the right area, Lucy. AI is not the problem. AI is only a problem because of the data centers that are associated with AI. The data centers use up a lot of water. They're going to require a rebuilding of the grid. And we were talking about this yesterday. The question is, right now, the Dominion Power down here is starting to talk about raising its rates in order to do data centers and the grid improvements. That's just begun. Our county is looking at AI and the data centers, and they also produce a tremendous amount of noise. So you don't want to have one of these right behind your house, because you'll never be able to talk to your partner ever again in the house. So what we need to take a look at is the regulation of the data centers. And of course, if you want to get rid of the placement of noise, then where it's located. But this is a local, state, and national effort. But AI is driving all sorts of stuff. It's coming. It's just like manifest destiny. It will come. The question is, how do you regulate it, and who has to pay the taxes? We started talking about whether or not you might have to raise taxes on the corporations that used it, as opposed to the person who sits at home watching TV is the same way they've done for the last 10 years. Why should their rates go up just because you have to pay for AI data centers and the grid? But this is and AI itself is not finished. It's only about a quarter of the way through. They need to be able to generate more power to do these algorithms to get the AI to work. It's a long way from being finished, but it is being used. My son, who works for the Customs Border Patrol, says that they're putting in AI at Customs Border Patrol to deal with the immigration issues on the border. That means almost every one of the government agencies will be dealing with AI at some point.
You're making my point, Dean. The point is that it's using all that energy.
That's right.
In those centers. They've gone back to coal from West Virginia because they don't have enough renewables to possibly cover this.
And they're opening zombie nuclear plants that have reached the end of life, are embrittled, but hey, you know, we could get another 20 years out of them and maybe nothing will happen.
Well, and we're putting in new nuclear plants in Virginia.
At what cost?
Whatever the cost is.
Cindy?
Hi. Okay, so I have 2 points. The first one, Sally, is you said that you feel like the work that I've been focusing on with militarism might be acceptable in terms of the greater UU work, and I wish
I think we just have to keep pushing it. You know, it's our job to keep trying to make that happen.
Okay, so that's personally on me to do, is what you're saying?
No, not you personally. It's all of us. Everybody in this,
whatever.
Yep.
Okay, well, I mean, I just was trying to see if you saw a certain opening for that or what. Anyway, thank you. The other thing, since AI was in the conversation, I'd like to add to that if I could. You know, as Dean said, you know, it's not AI itself that's the problem, except for the amount of energy it's using. But my concern is the role of the military with AI has been entrenched for many, many years. They've been using drones on the border here for a long time, years. The regulation, local, state, national, it's also international. It's a major concern of Antonio Guterres for COP, that there's some sort of regulation to control it. And in terms of Israel, Israel is one of the primary movers and shakers with AI. They're very entrenched in terms of the algorithms, the online watching over of groups like Facebook, and weeding out information and activists' ability to communicate. So anyway, maybe that's something that we can address in a few webinars at some point. Anyway, thank you. Over and out.
Anyone else?
Well, that sounds to me like you're talking about privacy, which is going away here in the United States. we'll end up like the UK, where we'll have CCTV on every corner. So every time you scratch your ear, it will be recorded. There's some people who believe that should never be the case. But again, that's one of these things where we have to talk about how much privacy do you get versus how much surveillance we need for legitimate purposes and even illegitimate purposes.
I'm
It's not just about privacy, Dean. The military is using AI for all kinds of military equipment, and Europe has decided a while back that they did not want their AI to have decision-making capability, that ultimately the decisions would be human-made. The US military has decided otherwise, and that will be that our AI weaponry will make its own decisions.
I've been very scared about AI from what I've read, that they will present more misinformation. They'll pretend that somebody or something is happening when it's not. And that really scares me.
It does. You know, some of it, I think there's some fear mongering out there. You know, they always say, oh, they're going to, you know, don't answer your phone, because if you say yes, they'll, or if they say no, they'll clone your voice and use it to, you know, I guess it could happen. I don't know how much of it really is, but it just, I don't know. It is like, I think Dean's right. I don't think we're going to be able to put the genie back in the bottle, but damn, I wish we could.
I wish we could too, because it scares me as much as Trump and 2025 do.
Are we through our PowerPoint?
No, we're not. I've lost it. Hold on. Let me find it again. It didn't come up on the share screen. Where is it? File open. We're close to the end.
Yeah, I thought we probably were.
Okay. I think
we're past this.
There
was one more slide about Green Amendment.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to point out, I did mention Green Amendment Day and so forth. And so that's how to connect moving forward. We've got our Twitter or X now, Facebook, the forum. I've been working with Rachel primarily for like a year and a half now to get our new site up, and I really have to give it more focus because it's going too slowly. But we do have a forum active, and so far it's mostly been me posting, and I would really love more people to join me there. Because I post articles that I hope people will be interested in responding to. And we could have a discussion, because we have discussions on email. The board does a lot, and it would be really nice to have more folks join in. So we had the farming conference, I posted something a few months ago about it coming back. The healthcare task force, I posted a bunch of articles. General Assembly. I've got, anyway, it's very easy to just read on here. If you want to create a post or a topic, you have to log in or register if you haven't registered yet, but there's all kinds of good stuff here. So please check it out. So.
Okay, well, I do have a reading to close us with.
Looks like Lucy wanted to say something.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't unmute. Rachel is working on the it's not MailChimp, but the other one that works on
Constant Contact.
No, it's not that either. Anyway, we can't change the way to sign into the new peace, equity, etc. task force until she can get the company to respond to be able to do that.
Yeah, okay.
That's GoDaddy.
GoDaddy, thank you.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, and
you can sign
I've
up
spent
for
2.5 hours
UUJEC
on.
site.
I've been spending 2.5 hours of this last week trying to get them to update our password and credit card information, and I don't see how anything could get that screwed up. I've never had a problem before, but it's been a pain. Sally may get her way. We might just move away. The closing reading that I have is, the modern conservative is not even especially modern. He's engaged, on the contrary, in one of man's oldest, best financed, most applauded, and on the whole, least successful exercises in moral philosophy. That is the search for a superior moral justification for selfishness. And this is John Kenneth Galbraith from Wealth and Poverty. Thanks, everybody. Geez, y'all stuck along to the end.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
It's a very good meeting.
Been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Take care. See you all.
Thank you. Right.
Thanks, everybody.